quiet. I wanted to ring the bell, invite the bell. I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. All right. Good evening and welcome to our 7th annual Indigenous Peoples Day. And my name is Tom Neale. I'm a member of the Racial Justice Ministry of the Boise Unitarian Universalist Fellowship here in Boise, Idaho. And it is our practice to begin our programs with a land acknowledgement. We come from and live on the homeland of the Boise Valley people, known as the Shoshone Bannock, the tribes of Fort Hall, the Shoshone Paiute tribes of Duck Valley, the Confederated tribes of the Warm Springs and the Perns Paiute tribe, both in Oregon, and the Fort McDermott Paiute Shoshone tribe in Nevada. They are known as the Newayni, the Numu, and the Numa. These lands and rivers were sustained for thousands of years by these people. We honor the original caretakers of this place. We strive to understand and reframe our responsibilities to land, to community. We affirm the relationships we have to each other, including our relations to animals and insects that inhabit the water, land, and sky. To all of us who remember the boarding school revelations, may we be granted compassionate understanding. May we find healing in the harm that lives in our history. May we find right relations with all beings. We honor the right to sovereignty for our Indigenous neighbors, and we acknowledge that a land acknowledgement is not enough. Further, we recognize that the wealth accumulated by our developing nation was with the forced labor of enslaved or uncompensated people of color. We believe the time for healing and reparation is now, and we are committed to justice and equity for all. So we are honored to have all of you joining us this evening. We are also honored to have Indigenous neighbors with us as well. We welcome those of you on Zoom. Thank you for being with us. We would love to know where you're coming from, where you're at, and if you have the tribes that were living there before colonization. So we are grateful for tonight's technical assistance from Nancy Harms and Mike Lemieux, and we extend deep gratitude to participants in our Racial Justice Ministry for their enthusiastic support in program planning and providing refreshments tonight. As Unitarian Universalists, we recognize many sources of wisdom and inspiration on our spiritual journeys. Our fellowship believes that justice works put our spiritual values into action, and the mission of the Racial Justice Ministry is to raise awareness and understanding of and engagement with race and racism. We expect to have time for questions and answers after Louise's presentation. For those of you on Zoom, we welcome your questions and comments. You may put those in chat at any time, and we will select as many as possible for discussion at the end of Louise's presentation. For those of you present here, hold your questions, and we'll come around with microphones and take as many as we can. So joining us tonight is Louise Dixey and her granddaughter, Casey. Thank her for coming along with us. A member of the Shoshone Bannock tribes, she is a descendant of the Boise Valley Shoshone, who were marched from the Boise Valley to the Fort Hall Indian Reservation. She is also a descendant of the Bannocks, who were from both the Salmon River and Yellowstone country. She is a graduate of Idaho State University with a bachelor's degree in political science. She is currently employed as the Cultural Resources Director for the Shoshone Bannock tribes, and she is a student of the Bannock language. Louise continues to research the history of the Shoshone and Bannock people who were removed from the homelands throughout Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Nevada, Utah, and Oregon. Louise is widowed and has 2 adult daughters, 5 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren. She and her husband Clyde ranched on the reservation for 45 years, and her family takes part in tribal cultural activities and other ceremonies. Her topic this evening is historical perspectives and current issues tied to the Boise Valley. We thank you for being with us, and it turns out it's again. She was here maybe 10 years ago, and so we welcome you back again, and grateful to have you with us, so welcome. Thank you.
So I hope, is the microphone on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, thank you, Frank. Louise Dixey inania na Shoshone Bannock Neale. Welcome to our homelands. My name is Louise Dixey, and I'm a member of the Shoshone Bannock tribes, as mentioned. And it's good to see Karen here tonight. And we've worked with the city of Boise for many years now. We've been, we entered into an MOA with the city of Boise, the Shoshone Bannock tribes and the Shoshone Paiute tribes. It was in the 1990s that MOA was entered into. And there were a number of different issues that the city of Boise agreed to because the two tribes helped stop any development, what was formerly known as Quarry View Park, and the East End neighborhood helped each of the tribes to partner to stop the development of the Eagle Rock Reserve, Eagle Eye Reserve, it's now known as. So we've been coming back for hundreds of years. In fact, descendants of the Boise Valley people, if you want to go to the next slide, reside today on the Duck Valley Indian Reservation at Owyhee, Nevada, at Fort McDermott, Nevada, at the Fort Hall Reservation in eastern Idaho, and the Burns Paiute Reservation in Oregon, and the Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon. Just click on it. The photo here is Frank and Pohi and George. They were inhabitants of the Boise Valley. Okay, click one more time. And they were actually, their families now reside at Fort Hall. Next slide, please. You know, while the non-Indians said that Le Bois is the term that was where the term Boise came from, but from our oral history, Alice George Crow, go ahead, click one more time, who was a member of the Shoshone Paiute tribe, on August 27, 1980, at Fort Hall said that Bosia is a Shoshone word that meant bloat. And the reason was due to the apples that they received in the rations that the Indian agent gave them. And many of the people eventually got sick from those rations. But that's oral history that she shared with us. Okay, the next slide, please. Charles Powell, who was a special Indian agent in Idaho Territory, reported that on February 2nd, 1869, that he had the honor herewith to transmit his monthly report, The Conditions of the Indians Under My Charge, the Boise and Bruno Shoshones, and a small band of Bannocks for January 1869. The weather has been very cold and the rivers frozen over, and severe snowstorms in the surrounding hills, with little in the valley, making it comparatively pleasant at the temporary reservation. And the reservation he's talking about is Eagle Island. The people that were rounded up were kept there at Eagle Island so that they could be transported or removed to some other area. And it's because there was gold and silver found in the mountains here east of Boise. He said, I have the Indians encamped about 6 miles above this place on the Boise River. Not a pleasant camping ground, but the best to be found in this section of the country, all things considered. From the various talks I've had with the Indians, they appear willing to be removed in March or April to their permanent reservation at Fort Hall. This, however, is their country, and they would prefer to remain, but agree to removal if the Great Father desires it. Also, on February 11th, 10 days later, the Idaho Statesman reported that 70 friendly Indians in Weiser Valley, reported by Walter Mason, chief of the friendly Indians, is Eagle Eye, fearing a removal to the Fort Hall Reservation, of which he had heard about from the Boise Indians. 2 councils were held with the Indians by Mason. The Indians expressed themselves that they are friendly, but do not want to be removed to Fort Hall. They want to remain where they are and say that they can supply themselves with all the food they want as long as their fishing privileges are not interfered with. And they were resolved not to go to Fort Hall. And Mr. Mason thinks that if they are taken there, they will be retained with great difficulty, but they want to see the big chief of the whites. Okay, next slide. Speaking of Boise, the Indian people used to live in districts similar to what they have now at Fort Hall. The Bruno, the Boise Shoshone, the Boise Bannock, and the Malheur people. The Indian people during that time had no choice. They were forced to go. It was sad the way the old people told it, Alice George Crowe stated on August 27, 1980. Photo on the right is Minnie Camas, who was a Boise Shoshone, and she was one of those who was removed to Fort Hall. Okay. The Boise Valley residents, in 1929, this is my husband's grandfather. His name was R.W. Dixey. In 1929, my father-in-law, Mary Dixey, in her oral history said, she spoke of his birthplace at the hot springs and the death of his mother when he was about 3 years of age. His mother was laid to rest there. This place where the hot springs was one of the campsites of our people. And the hot springs have always been a place and one of the areas used for prayers and medicine purposes. And that hot springs is where the warm springs used to be, and near the old penitentiary. So Ralph Dixey described the camps as they had looked during his earlier visits. He stated as a young boy, he hid some sticks which he had played with before his people were forced to move. And he came back as an adult and found them still in the place he hid them. In 1934, when he returned the second time, we camped here at Eagle Rock and swam in the river. Mr. Dixey told stories about the different places his people used and how badly the soldiers treated them and how they used the women whenever they wanted. Ralph Dixey was marched by the cavalry to Fort Hall when he was about 9 years old. That was my husband's grandfather. On October 10, 1864, the governor of Idaho, representing the United States as Superintendent of Indian Affairs for Idaho, and the Boise Shoshone Indian Nation signed the Treaty of Fort Boise, providing for cession to the U.S. of Boise Valley and the surrounding lands, 30 miles on each side of the river. But after more than a century, the U.S. Senate has not gotten around to ratifying those treaties. The U.S. still has not obtained Indian title to the Boise and Bruno lands of southwestern Idaho, although Caleb Lyon, governor and superintendent of Indian Affairs of Idaho, solemnly promised that this matter would be attended to. But it still hasn't been. On the next slide, these are some of the Boise Valley descendants. Charlie Diggy, who was only 6 years of age when pushed to Fort Hall by the cavalry. Diggy means hunter in the Shoshone language. Lucy Diggy Racehorse, my maternal grandmother, talked often about the fact that the Boise River ran red with the blood of our people. On the right, Charlie Diggy, Boise Shoshone, is seated on the left. June Johnson, Weiser Shoshone, is standing, and Sequence who lived in the Glens Ferry area were all removed to Fort Hall. Lyons report by this treaty that the Owyhee War has been extinguished, and he's talking about the Bruno Treaty. By this treaty, the Owyhee War has been extinguished. All the lands rich in minerals known as the Owyhee mines are ceded to the United States. By the prompt confirmation of this treaty by the Senate, the establishment of an agency on the Bruno Valley, the whole of the roving Shoshones of southern Idaho can be gathered in one body and peacefully controlled. However, in the end, Lyons' treaties went unratified, and the U.S. never acquired Boise Valley and the rest of southwestern Idaho from the Indians. Lyons successfully managed to have a reservation established by executive order for the Boise and Bruno Indians at Fort Hall. After a thorough search of the region to find a satisfactory location away from white settlement, a condition that the whites demanded for an acceptable Indian policy. And that was according to Merle Wells, the Idaho historian, in 1969. So on April 26, 1869, the agent, Charles F. Powell, reported, in compliance with your instructions to remove the Boise and Bruno Shoshone to the Fort Hall Reservation from their camp near Boise City, I started with them in a military escort on the 13th day of March, taking the overland Boise and Salt Lake Stage Road, it being the only passable one at this early season in spring, the Camas Prairie route being covered with deep snow. The day after my departure, it commenced storming, and to such an extent that you could only travel short distances per day, having to make short camps as it was impossible for the animals to travel. In making short drives and with great exertion, I made Clark's Ferry on the Snake River, some 130 miles from Boise City. At the point I was detained 2 days, as it was impossible to cross the river on the ferry boat or swim the stock to the south shore. U.S. Special Agent Charles F. Powell reported, and Clark's Ferry is where Glenn's Ferry is today. So at many points on the road where fishing and game were good, I could not refuse the Indians from making short stops. They promising me to join me, and consequently, some may have taken their way back, may have made their way back to Boise or vicinity. They are very much attached to that country, and it is but natural for them to return if permitted. They appear satisfied and pleased at the Fort Hall country. The expedition was 29 days from Boise City to this place, having traveled some 275 miles, and I'm proud to report accomplished without an accident of any kind, and but for the weather would have been pleasant, with 360 Indians, 100 animals, and the military escort with freight wagons. I have much to be thankful for. The military escort having satisfactorily accomplished the object for which it was sent, we broke camp on the 19th instant and returned to Boise. That was according to U.S. Special Indian Agent Charles Powell. But from time immemorial, the original Boise Valley people roamed throughout the area, and that is why many of our Momoatep in Bannock, our ancestors, are buried throughout the valley, including along Eagle Rock and Chief Eagle Eye Reserve. In 1863, Idaho Territory was created by the U.S. Congress, and the House Resolution 738 recognized Indian rights. On October 10, 1864, the territorial governor and Indian Superintendent Caleb Lyons recognized the Boise Shoshone land rights and entered into a treaty to cede Boise River Valley to the U.S. government. But when the treaty was submitted to Congress for ratification, it was not ratified. In 1871, Congress passed a law saying they would make no more Indian treaties, but they would pay a fair price to Indians for any land taken. In 1972, the Idaho Historical Society website declared the Boise Valley Treaty to be incomplete. As of 2011, no action has been taken by Congress. Even to this day, 2025, no action has been taken to correct this problem, and an estimated $600 billion worth of property in Boise Valley remains with clouded title. So today, we remember who we are. Because of our ties to the area, descendants of the Burns Paiute, Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs, Paiute Band, the Fort McDermott Paiute and Shoshone, the Shoshone Bannock and Shoshone Paiute, organized the Return of the Boise Valley People event, with the first one in late August 2011. More than 400 tribal people from the various tribes came to Quarry View Park, now known as Eagle Rock Park, and Barber Park, to share stories, oral history, and to pray for our ancestors. The event was moved to early summer because of the heat, so the second one was held on June 14th to 17th, 2012 at Quarry View Park in Gowan Field. The event has been held since then, and we are utilizing space at Gowan Field with the Idaho National Guard because of the trust relationship that the tribes have with the federal government. We no longer have to rent space to be in our original homelands. So the 2011 event, we gathered at Quarry View Park for meals and sunrise services, and we paid rent to the education facility at Barber Park. It was decided to continue the annual event following that initial one. So you'll see photos on the next slide. These are Burns Paiute elder Bucky Holliday. She's since then has been deceased. And the singers during the opening of the first event and our Nanawana, which are our relatives, greeted each other. And there were groundhogs that we cooked that had been frozen and were thawed out so that we could cook them. And we played traditional games, cooked salmon over the open fire. Those salmon came from the Columbia, and they were cooked by Geraldine Jim at the time. She's been gone now for about 10 years. So there's some other photos from 2012. If you could go to that next slide. We did similarly. We held events, this time at Eagle Rock, and we continued to conduct our sunrise ceremonies. The 2013 event is the next slide. And you can go to the next one. And on that top right, click on that photo, the top right one with the dancers, if it'll let you. No, it won't let you. Okay. Well, anyway, we held some of our traditional dances there, but unfortunately it won't play. So you can go on to the next slide. Oh, no, you'll get to it. You'll get to the one that you can be able to watch that dance right here. You should be able to click on that. This is called the feast dance. They'll go 4 times to that, where that, the choke cherries are in a pan out there. You can stop it right there, that's fine. So the reason we held that dance there is because when we cook those choke cherries and have them out where the dancers go to them, and then they bless the area when they sing these songs, and it's actually for prayer purposes that they do this dance. And the prayers are to allow all of the plants to grow and be plentiful, especially the choke cherries. And so all of our dances have meaning. So we had hoped that that would bring prayers and remind people that this area is really important to us. And today is known as Eagle Rock Park. So we can go to, skip forward to, clear to the next. We've held this event annually since then, and you could go to the next slide. 2015, you can see, 2016. And on top of that, we've worked with the Idaho Air Guard. We've renamed like a jet that actually fought in Afghanistan, and it was named Warrior Spirit. And General, he's now Adjutant General Donnellan, he flew that plane in Afghanistan, and he said that it was the only plane that was never received gunfire. And they believe it's because of the blessing that was we had a blessing for that jet there in the hangar at Gowan Field. And all of the people gathered there, and we did what we call a 49, which is, they're songs that are sung where we went around that aircraft to give it a blessing so that it could be used in battle. And to this day, it's been retired now. That was in 2016. So it flew in Afghanistan, and it did several war missions, but it was never shot. It never even received gunfire. All of the bullets were shot at everybody else, but it never once went toward that plane. And Adjutant General Donnellan, he can tell you stories about that. He was amazed because he was actually flying the plane. And then in 2018, we dedicated Black Hawk helicopter, and it has an Indian name. It's called Tuyusaipihi, which means Black Hawk. Yeah, but it was also used, and it did receive gunfire, but it was never shot down. And it's been retired now as well. So annually we continue to return to Boise. In order for us, in 2019, we renamed Quarry View Park to Eagle Rock Park, and Castle Rock Reserve to Chief Eagle Eye Reserve. And what we've done is we've worked with the city of Boise, and thanks to Karen, there have been so many different changes, including the renaming of the park, the acknowledgement by not only the city of Boise, but the state of Idaho. You can see the governor, Brad Little there, who was also on hand when we dedicated the new park. And there have been a number of changes. If you go down, I actually work in our department, we are called the Language and Culture Preservation Department, but we have 2 staff members that are part of the original territories and historic research. But what we do is we develop interpretive signage throughout Idaho, Oregon, Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada. And if you go downtown, you can see some of the signs that are, for example, right on the new park downtown, right in the center on Grove Street. There's a new walkway, there's an archway that shows some signs that were developed by our department. And then on, oh gosh, there's several. We've also worked on, at the city of Boise, the new water facility, and we have signage and history in that building. We worked with the Idaho State Historical Society, and if you've been down to the Idaho History Museum, all of the origin stories of tribes in Idaho are in that little theater there. And you can see our origin story. And we're still working on signage in Canyon County. All of the history of Maprock and much of the entire area, there will be signage so that you can learn more about the Boise Valley tribes. And there's several other projects we're working on. I just can't think of them all right now. But we do other signage. We've developed signage at down near Hagerman in the Hagerman fossil beds. We also we're collaborating right now. You could go to the last slide. We're collaborating with Idaho Fish and Game to develop, to manage the Centennial Marsh over near Fairfield, Idaho. We become co-managers, our tribe has, because there is a grass that has taken over the Centennial Marsh. You no longer see the camas lilies that you used to see that were so prevalent. Well, this grass has taken it over. And the camas is called pasigo in our Bannock language. And that historically, that's been a source of food for our people. And the Bannock War was fought because of that, the hogs that the farmers allowed to dig up the roots. But we still go there and harvest every year. We have several, there are 12 different treaties that our people entered into, and only 2 of them were ratified by the Senate. There was also another treaty down at Long Tom Creek, just north of Mountain Home there, and that was never ratified either. And that was to remove the Bannocks that had settled in that area, to remove them to Fort Hall. So when the Shoshone Paiute tribes want to build a casino south of Boise, well, actually, there's a reason for that. You know, our tribe has land that we purchased too at Mountain Home, but we have plans. We're probably going to do some interpretation at that site because the Long Tom Creek Treaty was negotiated by our Bannock chief. His name was Tagi, and he also was here in Boise. But my mom's great-grandfather, his name was Captain Jim, and we still have all of his documents that our grandma saved. And he had to have papers that allowed him to leave Boise to go hunt in the surrounding areas. We even have all of those original documents, and they're from the 1860s. But we kept them all. Our grandma kept them all because she wanted to let people know that, yes, we did come from here, from Boise. And all of the areas around here, are what our people utilized. And those are what we used to meet with the city of Boise. And I can't remember the mayor then. Yeah, Mayor Beater. Yeah, we met with him. Thank you, Karen. We had 15 minutes to meet with him, and my sister and Lori Edmo, she is editor of the Shoshone News. Well, we met with the mayor for 15 minutes one morning on a Saturday morning when he had an open access meeting for the public. We went in and told him, we're going to make the city of Boise fulfill that memorandum of agreement that you signed, and you've never fulfilled it, like renaming all these different areas as acknowledgement to our people. And they were supposed to help build a cultural center. And they signed an agreement. So that's something we're working on right now. And we're hoping that all of you folks and anyone else in the area that wants to help with that, we have formed a nonprofit foundation called the Original Boise Valley People. And with that, or through that organization, it represents 5 tribes. It's non-political. We're all volunteers. And we're hoping to advocate the state legislature to have them help us build that cultural center. So anyway, I think I've taken quite a bit of time and all the rest. I have so much more that we could present. I have other PowerPoints about our treaties. That's why Casey couldn't find my presentation, because I think on one jump drive I have about 20 or 30, and then on these others I have a few more. But I've been doing historic research for litigation since the early 90s. I was employed as a paralegal, and so that's where I really wanted to why I really wanted to make sure that our story is told and that it's told by us. We need to tell our own story. And I appreciate you having us come here tonight. And I was telling Tom earlier that I was here about 10 years ago. My sister Lori and I made a similar presentation here at this church. And I know Claire Manning Dick from Hawaii, she came with us that night. And so it wasn't hard to find. Yeah. And, there's so much more work to be done. And now it's just a crazy time because funding for tribes has been, a lot of the federal funds for management of our resources have been cut, eliminated. Even the Bureau of Indian Affairs at Fort Hall, they used to have 7 people working in the realty department because our reservation is 549,000 acres. And 98% of that is owned either by the tribe or by individual landowners. So it's a huge reservation. We're not like none of the northern Idaho tribes. They have very little ownership of their land. Even the Shoshone Paiutes, they don't own their land individually. At Fort Hall, we were allotted under 4 different allotment acts, not the Dawes Act. We were never part of the Dawes Act. We were allotted pursuant to our first treaty and pursuant to the 2nd session, the 3rd session, and the 4th session. When the final one was the removal of the Ugaitica people at Salmon to Fort Hall in 1907. But we've had so many unratified treaties. So every year our department, our tribe has made sure that we go back to those homelands. We had this, not only do we come here to Boise for the original Boise Valley People gathering, that's usually the first part of June. But right at the end of May, we go back to Fairfield, Idaho, which is where Centennial Marsh is located, and we harvest camas there. And then July 3rd of each year, we go back to Fort Bridger, Wyoming, where our treaty was signed, the Fort Bridger Treaty of 1868. It was ratified, and it is law, but it wasn't a cession agreement. It was a peace treaty. And then we returned to Virginia City, Montana, because there was a treaty signed there in August of 1868, and that was unratified. But fortunately, Chief Tindoy, who signed that treaty, he also signed a cession document that outlined all of the territories that his people had used, including traveling with the Bannocks throughout southwestern Montana, over into Yellowstone, down into Wyoming, and back to, it was like a cyclical rounds. We called them our subsistence round. And we also, let's see, we have the Bannock Gathering at Fort Hall, and the Shoshone Reunion was just held in Oklahoma. There are Shoshone-speaking people throughout the West. So annually they host a Shoshone Reunion, and they were in Oklahoma 2 weekends ago. So, and the Comanches speak Shoshone. Several different tribes are from the Uto-Aztecan language family, and they all get together and have a gathering. Yeah. So that's all for now. I'll now answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Louise, for being with us. And yeah, we'll be taking some questions, and maybe you could start out with how can we be good neighbors for Fort Hall and any of the other tribes in the area? What can we do?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that can happen. The partnerships to get support for all of the different interpretation that needs to happen here in the city of Boise. Also, when we begin our efforts to establish a cultural center, we'll need support, acknowledging all of the, well, I think collaboration on a number of different things, like the, right now, all of you are you're going to be in the same position we are, because Lucky Peak Dam is being relicensed. You know, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is, they're in the process of filing a new license. Well, the proponents are those who, because originally when that dam was built, there were no cultural studies that were done. And we're insisting that there be cultural studies completed, because according to our oral history, our people were buried all the way from the whole valley and all the way up to Idaho City, where the road goes up there. Our people are buried all along that road. And we know that because our grandparents told us. And many of those, and even today, you know, this, not only the Lucky Peak is being relicensed, but there's a big transmission line that's coming. It's called Boardman to Hemingway, and that transmission line is coming from the Oregon side and connecting down in Canyon County. And there are all kinds of cultural sites that are being impacted by that. And we've been monitoring all of those efforts and making sure that the sites are not destroyed. Yeah. So I think being aware of that, and you know, if there's any way for, I think there are so many different efforts being taken now to open up all of our federal lands. And see, our treaty guarantees us the right to hunt, fish, and gather on all public lands of the United States. And we've been advocates. We've been our best advocate, because what we do is, for example, along the Columbia River and all of the dams on the Columbia River, we have had a natural river policy since the early 80s. We've been proponents of removal of all of those federal dams because all of the anadromous fish runs, the salmon, are just all being decimated by those dams. And even worse now, you know, we were the ones to, you know, there was the sockeye salmon were listed as endangered. we were the tribe that filed that petition. So there's so much that can be done to make sure that, this natural river policy needs to happen. Those 4 federal dams need to be removed. Otherwise, we can't say that we even have any salmon anymore. And our fisheries department at Fort Hall, we grow salmon oils to be released up in the Salmon River drainage. And we have, because our people we hunt salmon with spears. And we do not sell any of our salmon, not like the Columbia River tribes. They harvest salmon to sell, and we don't do that. We've never allowed that of our membership, and we still don't today. Plus, we still harvest our salmon by spears. So it's a traditional method of hunting and fishing. But we even have an Idaho Supreme Court case that acknowledged that our word, digi, means to not only to hunt, but to fish, to hunt for fish. And that's what we do. And we did all along the Boise River. But those are the types of things that people need to be aware of and help support those policy issues to remove those dams and to make sure that our lands remain open and not used without. Now there's this big effort to remove Section 106 of the Historic Preservation Act, where federal agencies do not have to seek consultation with tribes or with anyone for that fact. Now they're wanting to just come and mine, even in the Owyhee Canyon lands. Stibnite Gold Mine they made a deal with the Shoshone Paiutes. Now they're wanting to harvest, they're going to start mining in the Owyhee Canyon lands. They're going to mine for gold. And the way you mine for gold, they're anywhere where they dig for gold, they use leaching ponds that have all type of hazardous substances in order for them to recover that gold. But then the water is totally contaminated. So, just be aware of all of those issues and try to support efforts to make sure our federal lands remain free and open for all people to use. There's so many things that can be done. Our tribe, we're not like the Nez Perce where we go out and tell our story to everybody else. We just do the work and make sure that we have access to those areas. But access is really important. And we're preserving those things. Our tribe has had a really aggressive land purchase policy since the early 1950s. So we bought back land. We have over 7,500 acres that the tribe has purchased all throughout Idaho, where our people came from. And we use those lands so that make sure that our people have access to them, so they can carry out the rights that were guaranteed in our treaty. So that's what we're doing.
Okay. And so I know of some issues, again, with the Camas Prairie, that sometimes you have events where you can get help to come and remove the noxious and invasive weed, right?
Right.
So I hope you'll let us know about those things. We can maybe meet you there for that. That would be.
Well, you know what we've done? Well, we formed a partnership with the Bureau of Land Management, with local residents of the Camas Prairie, with the Nature Conservancy, with several nonprofits that we're doing test projects, and Idaho State University, and now the University of Idaho even wants to help us, because this is called the Garrison's Creeping Foxtail. Right. That's the grass that was made a part of the seed mix out for the farmers and ranchers in the Camas Prairie. So what that is, that grass it's like crabgrass. If you've ever tried to pull up crabgrass, they call them a rhizomatous root structure. So that even though you pull some of it out, those rhizomes will spread and grow over here or over here. They'll pop up everywhere. And so those grasses, we're trying to work with the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, to change our seed mix in that area so that they won't be utilizing those seeds and causing more damage. Because what they do is they call it oh gosh, what do they call it? Anyway, the roots get so packed together that there's no sunlight allowed the camas cannot grow through those thatch. It's called a thatch.
Oh,
yeah. So they can't grow through that. So we have several different groups that are helping us, and we've built test plots. So we're doing a lot of different test plots that we've designated this past year. So this is going to be an effort that goes on forever in order to make sure that the camas grows. And you know, the local residents, they couldn't even believe that was happening. They didn't know what was happening. So we were real fortunate that we had the Idaho director of the Bureau of Land Management. The Native American specialist is also a botanist, and she's the one who helped us learn a lot more about that, because we couldn't believe that had taken over so much. And even all of the local people who rely upon the tourist industry, they were just overwhelmed, couldn't believe that the camas weren't growing anymore. Yeah, so, but we're working with all of them to make sure that at least for the next, we have a 5-year plan, and the tribe is, because we've become co-managers of that now, we have a responsibility to make sure that the camas grows, because it's a food source for our people. So, anyway.
Yeah, that's an interesting problem, and I'm glad you have some ways to address it, and groups helping too.
Yeah.
So that's
but we can
good
use
to hear.
everyone's help.
Yeah, okay. And I thought I saw questions or two around. Yes, sir.
The question is, are you documenting your language and converting it to English like the Chickasaws did?
I can't hear.
Question is, I'm familiar with the Chickasaw transporting their language into English and creating a dictionary. Are you doing the same thing?
We are.
Good for you.
Yeah, we're actually, in 2009, a group of our elderly Bannock ladies wanted to make sure the Bannock language survived. So they advocated to our governing body, the Fort Hall Business Council, to help us promote Bannock language classes. But today, we have both Shoshone and Bannock language classes. Since 2020, during COVID, we started doing Zoom classes of both Shoshone and Bannock. Now, because the tribe had a ransomware attack, now we've converted to Teams. So we send out, all tribal members can take part in the language classes. We have a Shoshone language instructor and a Bannock language instructor, and we have 2 apprentices, but both of them have become almost fluent. And we try, everything that we do, we try to advocate for people to use the language. Excuse me, and we also have an immersion school, a Shoshone immersion school at Fort Hall. It's a charter school, and right now we're teaching the teachers how to teach Shoshone. Yeah, our department is. But we just need a lot more people a lot more funding. So we've applied for, we work with several different departments to apply for funding so that we can make sure that it continues. But we've been really fortunate that the tribe funds our language programs. And we offer those twice a week. Bannock class, we were doing every noon hour, but now we switched back to evening classes. so that more people can be part of it, so they can either come in person or join on Teams. And that's Monday and Wednesday evenings from 5:30 to 7, and then Tuesday and Thursday is Shoshone. So we try to incorporate it as much as possible in our buildings, on signage, in the schools, but the local schools, not in the public schools, because Idaho has that English-only policy. So they're not going to allow native languages to be taught in the public schools. Yeah.
So you mentioned many unratified treaties, and I'm wondering what the opportunities are legally for the tribes because those aren't ratified. Are there any opportunities since they've not been ratified, or where legally are some opportunities to help your cause?
Congress ended treaty making in August of 1869. So there can be no more treaties made. All we can do is legally, we cannot force Congress to ratify those treaties, or the Senate. And I don't think they will ever ratify them. But we can make sure that we have retained the treaty rights that we do have under our 1868 treaty. And we do have several court cases that support us in those efforts. The Idaho Supreme Court ruled in favor of us in our to continue harvesting our fish through our traditional means in a case called State of Idaho versus Tinno, T-I-N-N-O, and that they ruled in favor of the tribe. And then there have been Supreme Court cases. My great-grandpa, let's see, it would be, my great-grandpa, his name was Racehorse, John Racehorse Sr. He was cited in Wyoming for hunting elk. And that case went in the circuit court ruled in, that was in 1878. Yeah, so that case, it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the state of Wyoming asked that they claimed that the treaty did not survive statehood in Wyoming. So it wasn't until 2023 that the U.S. Supreme Court overruled that case. So the important part of that is that our tribe, we write our own regulations. We control, we regulate our membership both on and off reservation because we have federal reserved rights off reservation. So our fish and game officers patrol all over, like the South Fork of the salmon up in north of here, over in the Salmon River drainage. We harvest salmon over in eastern Oregon on the John Day River. Yeah, because that's where many of our people came from. In fact, my dad's grandmother, my paternal great-grandmother, her name was Lizzie Randall Edmo. She was born and raised in the Blue Mountains. So there are a lot of Bannock people that came from that area. And they, many of them utilized the resources and gathered here in Boise. In fact, her brother we have our own interviews of her brother who showed people from Fort Hall all of these caves that were up here where our people were buried behind the dam up here on the Boise River. And he even knew where the Boise Reservation was supposed to be. And it was at the headwaters of the Boise River. Yeah, so he knew where it was. So we have oral history that documented that. Yeah.
So I grew up in Boise, and when I was young, my Cub Scout leader took me out to Map Rock, and it was very visible in the 50s. Now it seems pretty decimated. There's petroglyphs all up and down the Snake River, and the BLM's attitude about them seems to be is just, it seems like they don't want to talk about them, hoping they aren't destroyed. So I guess I have a couple questions for you. Are the tribes involved with those petroglyphs? Are there any plans? I mean, there's more on the south side of the Snake, it seems like. Maybe I'm the only one here that's even interested, but petroglyphs just fascinate me, and I've hiked out there to see them along the river. Is there anything that the tribes, do you have any comments about that at all, or?
Well, those that are on private land, we can't access those.
Right, but
Only the federal lands can we make sure that those are managed
And-
by the federal agencies to make sure that they're protected.
and the ones that I'm talking about are on BLM land.
Yeah,
And their attitude, I don't know what their attitude is, but they seem like their attitude is to not talk about them so people don't bother them and destroy the artifacts, which I guess
but there are federal laws now that there never were before.
are
The
there.
Native American Graves Repatriation Act, it's called NAGPRA. And there are also, several different federal laws that protect sacred sites. Yeah, there's Sacred Sites Protection Act. There are just so many. There are a lot of different laws that protect cultural sites. And they're to be managed according, the federal agencies have a responsibility to manage them accordingly. But they're right now, well, just within the last few months, their power has been reduced substantially because they've eliminated so many positions. Also, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they're the enforcement entity for the feds. So they monitor those sites. And they have the authority to cite non-Indians or anyone who desecrate the sites or are taking advantage of them. And I know of a number of people who have been cited and have gone to prison for desecrating sites and for even chipping away. A lot of people have chipped away those petroglyphs and taken them home. Yeah. We've seen a lot of that.
Canyon County has a little park, and we took a tour there once. They have some petroglyphs on the side. When our tour guide was talking about, he caught a guy, because there's petroglyphs on both sides
Yeah.
of the river.
Yeah.
He caught a guy that was slicing off a petroglyph and throwing it in his truck, and he just was lucky enough to catch him. But they're just so fragile and so
Yeah. Yeah.
thousands of years old, some of those, and I guess I really like petroglyphs. I just think it's so
Yeah.
sad. but
Well, that's how our
sad.
people told their story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And MapRock, a lot of people have tried to figure out what it means, but we know the meaning. We have oral history that talks all about it, and we're very, very fortunate that we have elders that have talked about it and shared that information, including my great-grandfather was one of them. He knew the whole story.
And
Yeah.
when I was a kid, Map Rock, when I was 10, it was obvious. You could see it really well. And as an adult, I took my wife and my kids there, and we could hardly see it. It's just,
Yeah.
people can walk on it, unfortunately, and it's
Yeah.
just really to
'Cause
me,
it's
a sad thing.
Yeah, because it's been turned over to Canyon County. Yeah, so they were supposed to, we're working on interpretation with Canyon County, but, they don't have the funding either to do good, to tell the story or to even manage properly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have a site picked out for the cultural center yet?
No, we don't. We do have some land that was turned over to us by, up on, gosh, what's the name of that road? It's going to Bogus Basin Road. Yeah, but it's clear up there. I think we are looking for a location closer to town that would be more feasible, because to have access to utilities, a road right away, all of those things are what we are looking for. Yeah.
And are you currently fundraising for that? Do you have
Yeah,
some
we
fundraising?
are. We haven't, did an outright fundraising campaign, but that's something we plan to do starting this next spring. Yeah. So when we do, we'll let all of you know. Yeah.
So how does the casino work?
How does it work?
Is it a good resource for you, I guess? Yes?
Well, it's, unlike other forms of gaming, Indian gaming is highly regulated. We're not like the state of Nevada where the state can just automatically regulate casinos. I used to work in gaming, yeah. But as far as any tribe that wants to build off reservation, you have, under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, that land must be in trust, meaning that it needs to be owned by the tribe, but brought back into trust by the federal government, meaning that the title would reside with the federal government. So that's the process that we're in right now.
Okay.
And the regulations have been rewritten to the disadvantage of every tribe. So that's a major hurdle that needs to be overcome. And then Indian gaming, it must be, under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, the funding must be used to support tribal government services. It doesn't go in anybody's pocket. It goes to support tribal government services. So you have to help fund the police department, the fire department, tribal government in general. So, we're bound by federal statute on how the money will be used.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's not like any other gaming, not even the Idaho Lottery. They're not as regulated as Indian gaming. Yeah. And there are federal minimum internal control standards that
Really?
have to be met as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That brings up a question. A couple of years ago, I had a friend who went to gamble on it was a casino in Oregon, I think. He had a stroke in the parking lot, and this is not entirely related to what you're talking, but just need to know. They called 911, but they couldn't come because the reservation had its own, EMS. They ended up literally dragging him by hand, 2 blocks, and he never recovered and died a week later. And I'm just wondering, how does that work on the casino end of things? Do you have your own EMS on the reservation, or?
Oh yeah, Fort Hall we do. That's a whole different legal spectrum. In Idaho, they have what they call Public Law 280, and that was in 1963, that was adopted by the well, it's a federal statute, but the tribes could choose to have the counties and the state regulate or handle law enforcement on the reservation, or they could choose not to. Idaho adopted 8 different areas, and but I'd have to go back and review all of those with you, because it's, but as far as Fort Hall is concerned, that's a huge chunk of gaming money goes for our fire department and ambulances. We have our own ambulance services. So, but we have a memorandum of agreement. We're required to, by Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, to enter into agreements with surrounding counties to make sure that because we do not have criminal jurisdiction over non-Indians at our gaming facility. We have civil jurisdiction. So you have to have an agreement between the local counties or the city, if you're within a city, but in our case, at the counties, We have an agreement with Bingham County and with Bannock County to respond if there's a criminal issue. But if it's a civil issue, or if it's like a medical emergency, we also, our own ambulance response. And we have our own EMS, we have our own fire departments. We spend a lot of money on, in fact, we just had a whole new fire department built to house, because we have a hotel that's 4 stories. Is it 4 stories, Casey? Yeah, it's 4 stories. You're required to have a fire truck that can go up that high with this big giant ladder. So that cost the tribe a couple $1 million just for that fire truck. And then we donate to counties to help them with their services. So we have a gaming distribution plan. So we help support the surrounding communities with it's called the Community Development Fund. So we give money to surrounding counties to help them with what their needs are. In fact, some schools also receive funding from our gaming. Yeah.
Yes, I'm a former miner, and I was involved in water pollution control from mines. And in mining, as a lot of you know, there's a thing called tailings that come out of the mines. And there's also what we call a bone pile. And we had a bone pile that was 40 million tons, 5% zinc, richest zinc mine in the world. Well, we didn't make enough effort to try to work that, but recent studies have shown that if you, in the world, I think it is, certainly in the United States, if you rework the tailings and the bone piles, there's no need to punch a new hole in the ground ever. In other words, in those waste stream or waste piles, we can meet all of our demands.
Well, I have a comment on that. You know, FMC and Pocatello, they process the phosphate ore in southeast Idaho. And on our reservation, we had a phosphate mine that was open from 1953 to 1993. Anyway, that big phosphate mine, the zeophos that was produced by the FMC Corporation, they're held in ponds just south of Pocatello, southwest of Pocatello. And there's 9 ponds. And those have a half-life of 10,000 years. They'll never be decontaminated, never. In our lifetimes, and how many lifetimes? So there's a major Superfund site there on the Machad Flats. And so those are the hazards that come with mining, because you have major Superfund sites that have been created because of that. Even off reservation and near Soda Springs, where the same problem is developed there. And Simplot is still continuing to mine there, those phosphate mines. So they're shipping all of their ore through a slurry line over to Pocatello, from Soda Springs to Pocatello, and it crosses our homelands. And see, the city of Pocatello was built on reservation land, and the railroads illegally built railroads without any kind of right-of-way. So, but that ore is being, the big slag piles you see, they're building mountains there above Pocatello, but all of those are contaminated. So all of that is filtering down into the groundwater, into the Portneuf River. And the city of Pocatello doesn't want to admit it, and they don't want to deal with it. But the state of Idaho, the tribe are the ones who are funding all the efforts to clean up that area. The city of Pocatello isn't. And the State Department of Health and Welfare, they have allowed so many hazardous waste to be created because they failed to enforce the law. Yeah, so there's so many fights. I could talk on and on about it, but I'm not the authority, but I'm just telling you the truth. Yeah, I've seen it happen. Our dad was on the council for 33 years, and Well, my husband worked at Gay Mine for 30 years. Yeah, he was a mining foreman. But, you know, there have been a lot of benefits, but now we're living with all the detriment, yeah, for the rest of our lives, and our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives, yeah.
Well, I can talk about a lot of solutions that were good solutions. But the CEO said no, and so there were several of us guys, we just quit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. I'm getting, my throat's getting sore. And we have to drive home in the morning. I'm going to let Casey drive. I'll take my life in my hands and let Casey drive.
Yeah, she's got you covered, I think. Very good. Well, we'd like to close tonight with, first of all, thank you all for coming and being here with us. Thank you all on Zoom for being with us as well. And we'd like to close with a poem. It's written by Al Hunter of the Anishinaabe Nation, and he's a member and former chief of the Rainy River First Nations, and this is called Prayer Bowl. When the moon is turned upwards like a bowl waiting to be filled, we must fill it. We must fill it by honoring the spirits of creation with songs of our joy and thanks, with foods created with our own hands, water for the thirsty, prayers for the people, prayers for the spirits, prayers for the Creator, prayers for ourselves, and for the sacred instruments that join us to the glory of this world, that join us to the glory of this world and to the world beyond our sleep. Thank you again for coming here. Take care, everyone. And we have refreshments in the back room here, please. Help yourselves.